Morning and welcome to the first meeting of our House Revenue Committee here for this budget session in 2024, the 67th legislature. First order of business is to call the roll. So Marilyn, could you please call the roll? Thank you.
Certainly. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Representative Bear.
Here.
Representative Byron.
Excused.
Representative Locke.
Present.
Representative Northrup.
Here.
Representative Oakley.
Here.
Representative Storer.
Here.
Representative Strock.
Here.
Representative Zwanitzer.
Here.
Chairman Harshman.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And welcome, folks. And we've kind of moved places. We're obviously in room 5, and so a little bigger room because property tax is going to be, it's obviously an important issue to citizens of our state. And this committee and has worked hard on this issue, and we're continuing that work. Again, just, kind of explain the rules of the road. Most of you, as I look out in the audience, or have been to many committee meetings, but the first thing is if you have a cell phone, make sure and turn that thing on vibrate or turn it off so it doesn't disrupt the meeting. I think some of the decorum things, the rules of the road in here, we never get into conversations between each other. We always direct them through the chairman. So direct all those conversations through the chairman. And again, I think, when you're in the audience, sometimes you're going to have people up here discussing issues that you don't agree with, and we're not going to clap or boo or make noises in the audience, those kinds of things. And so that's the part of the thing, just the formality of it, and make sure everybody's viewpoint is heard here. So with that, I think we have 3 bills that we're going to work today. And then you saw, if you watched yesterday in the House, we had a committee bill on a sales tax revision, and it had a tax in it. In fact, we were going to make that a Senate file. And then staff said, hey, this thing has got a streaming tax in it. And I don't know, it passed the committee that way, and I haven't gone back and looked at who voted for it. Obviously, most of us probably voted for it in committee. And that bill went down on introduction. We got the wholly undemocratic, unholy 1971 constitutional amendment that requires 2/3 to introduce a bill. There's my little editorial for today. But that was brought in 1971 by the legislature. Back, before we had an LSO staff and we hand wrote the amendments and smoked on the floor. But anyway, no more editorial on that issue, but it went down on the 2/3 vote. So I requested a new bill that takes that paragraph P on page 3 out, because these sales tax revisions are important for running our state, and particularly to clear up any confusion for citizens of our state. We're not going to tax garage sales. We're not going to tax lemonade stands. We're not taxing free admissions when those are given. So those kind of things. So that bill's been drafted. I'm hoping then the House Revenue could just sponsor that bill and we move that over to the Senate. But I'll talk to members about that, but I wanted to let the public know that. Okay, and then today, so we've got, I think, 11 property tax bills in the House now, 10 or 11, 12, there'll probably be more filed today. So as we work through these 3 bills today, and we want to make any amendments or changes, take your testimony, try to improve them and make them better. We get to the end of that, I want to lay these back and not take a final vote and move them to general file, because I want to get them all in here. And I think then we kind of know what's past introduction votes and what are our options. And so, because it's hard to predict this process. So we might, be sitting here on a Thursday in a couple of days going, geez, we don't have that option anymore. What can we do? And so I think just so we can move the best product forward for our state, for our people. So that's the plan today. So we're gonna fully work these bills. Okay, members, any other comments? I'm gonna move now to, right now, the first bill on the table for discussion is House Bill 3, property tax exemption for long-term homeowners. Now, I've talked probably 5 minutes straight now, and I can keep talking and explain this bill, but is there another member here who would like to highlight this bill? Representative Oakley, thank you. Please explain the bill to the committee and to the members of the audience.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So as,
Vice Chair Oakley.
oh,
And if I
Yes.
could just, I just wanted, Representative Oakley is the Vice Chair of the House Revenue Committee, so in my absence, she'll run the committee, so thank you.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I will just briefly go over House Bill 3. Of course, it's a Revenue Committee bill, so everybody here is well aware. It's a pretty straightforward bill and straightforward concept, which is a tax exemption for long-term homeowners. So as specified on page 2, it is a 50% exemption for a primary residence for long-term homeowners. And how that is defined in this bill is if somebody is 65 years of age or older, and they have paid residential property tax in Wyoming for 30 years or more, they would receive this 50% exemption. And again, so then basically the bill goes through and then it says that not more than one exemption under this paragraph shall apply. So it's not a double up situation. Talks about what, again, what primary residence is, defines owner of a house. That's on page 3. Noticing that we did page 3, the first paragraph, that a surviving spouse of a person who qualified under the paragraph, if they become deceased, the spouse would continue to qualify for the exemption. Their property taxes wouldn't go back to the original. So again, definitions, things like that. That's the bill, unless we want to go over it, line by line. That's what, in essence, this bill does.
Okay, very good.
And
Go ahead.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I guess I just wanted to say, we're kind of doing it, I'm not as if I'm presenting the bill, so I'm going to say that the concept behind this bill, I think probably seems apparent, but it was the convergence of two things that I was hearing and that I think we all were hearing repeatedly in this broad discussion about property taxes and their kind of surge. One, we just heard repeatedly, heard the governor say it yesterday, that property taxes were hitting senior citizens and elderly people especially hard. And another concept that was brought to me by a constituent saying that, there should be an endpoint where the property that you own isn't attached to a tax or isn't a burdensome tax, so that you don't feel like you completely own your property. Obviously, this is a compromise as far as it's 50%. It's not 100%, but it certainly significant to get a 50% exemption. And if you look at the concept, also the people in Wyoming who've owned their property and have been here for 30 years, one, have seen the biggest increases between the purchase price and the current market price. These are, probably they're not the people who are driving the market changes, but they have lived in their Wyoming community and in their home, and they've committed and dedicated and paid into Wyoming. If you've done that for 30 years, then you've pitched into your community and your schools. So this gives significant relief to those who have paid their dues, seen the biggest increases, and maybe have a little age on them and aren't working anymore. So I think it's a good solution. It's one of the solutions that we're looking at. And I figured with what we've heard with property taxes that this one would have broad support, but I guess we'll see when we discuss it. So
Okay,
that's the bill.
thank you. Okay, we are going to move now to public comment on this bill, and is there anyone here that would like to speak against the bill? I'm going to divide those against and those for. So anybody here would like to take a few minutes in opposition to the bill? Now's your chance. Yeah, come on up, please, and then just introduce yourself, where you're from, if you represent any organization, or just represent yourself? Good morning.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. The main thing that I see wrong
Can
with
I,
this,
is your mic on, or will you have to, is it on, your mic?
it is.
Well, can you just pull it a little closer and then just
Okay.
introduce and tell us your name and
Okay.
where you're from?
My name's Gary Brown. I'm from Cheyenne.
Okay, very good,
Central
Mr. Brown.
Committee member here.
Thank you for being here this morning, Mr. Brown.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So, Mr. Chairman, the main thing that I see wrong with this bill is the durational period. I understand that people who have been here for a long time have contributed more to the taxes that have been paid. However, people who have been here for a least or less amount of time, they have also paid taxes, and they're not getting hit less by inflation, and their fixed incomes aren't the same. They are also on fixed incomes, and so this is a problem for them. I've talked to people that have not been in Wyoming for 30 years that are looking at losing their homes due to their property taxes. So this is the main thing I see with this.
Questions of Mr. Brown? You know, I think it's probably the biggest thing I've heard too is the durational part. Could we put some tiers in there? You know, maybe at 20, maybe at 10 or something instead of just, so very good. Appreciate your comments.
Okay.
Go ahead.
The one thing I would say further is I think 10 years would be more like what we should do.
Okay, very good. Appreciate it. Any questions of Mr. Brown? Okay, thank you, sir. Appreciate you being here this morning. Okay, anyone else would like to speak against this bill? Now I'm just going to move for the bill. Anybody in favor of the bill? Come on up and if there's more of you, boy, just fill these seats up. We can fill them up and good morning. Please introduce yourself.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Tate Mullen. I'm the Government Relations Director for the Wyoming Education Association. First, I want to thank you all for your work on this incredibly difficult topic. We know that there are a lot of folks across the state of Wyoming, especially some of our elder folks across the state on fixed incomes who are really hurting. That being said, and this isn't in support or against, but just urging a little bit of caution as we move forward on this. During one of joint appropriations meetings, Representative Stith asked Don Richards why I don't see a structural deficit in education any longer. And Don Richards' answer was pretty simple, and that was, one, our minerals, which is more short-term that we can't project for, but the long-term, which is more stable source of revenue, are our property taxes. Those property taxes fund education at the local level, and without getting into the complexities of our education funding model, they are of great importance to our local communities and to the state in terms of revenue for those services. So again, I appreciate your work and would just urge some caution as we move forward on this.
Good. Any questions for Mr. Mullen? Okay, thank you for being here. Okay, go ahead. Next, introduce yourself, Mr. Mullen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brett Moline, Wyoming Farm Bureau, sitting in support of this bill. This hits my membership quite well. The aging structure of agriculture. Our farmers and ranchers in Wyoming are getting less young, if I can put it that way. I do appreciate that it also includes the residents, that if you are a corporation or another entity involved in agriculture, the reason that a lot of agriculture is in these other organizations is for tax purposes, for a lot for income tax, estate planning, et cetera. But those houses are truly being used as a residence. So sitting in support of this bill, I think this will dovetail in quite nicely into some of the other issues we're going to be looking at. With that, Mr. Chairman, committee, I would sit for any questions, sitting in support of the bill.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Moline? Did you have a question? Okay. I just have a quick question, you know,
Yes, sir.
on that, how long have you been a Wyoming resident?
Well, over 61 and a half years myself, so.
Okay.
So I'm knocking on the door. The handle ain't turning, but I'm knocking on the door of being eligible for this program.
Yeah. Now you're a year and a half ahead of me, I think. I What about the thought, this, Mr. Brown talked about, and we've heard some of that about tiers, some different tiers. Now, obviously, this bill is very targeted, and you see the fiscal note, it's $5 million. I mean, it's not a $500 million change to the structure. So, but any thoughts about that kind of, 20 years, 10 years, that kind of thing, as a 61 and a third year resident?
Well, Mr. Chairman, yeah, to me, this bill, as I said, dovetails into some of the other issues that are going to be in front of your committee. So this hits a target audience of the less youthful. Some of the other issues I think will fix some of the other problems. The fiscal note, I won't say it's minimal. That's the best word I can come up with. But I think the biggest thing this does is it really targets an audience. And as far as the tiering of it, that can be done, but I'm a big believer in the KISS. Keep it simple, silly. And so when you start doing the tiers, it'll broaden out who it impacts, but also the administration of the program becomes more cumbersome. It can be done. I have faith that can be done, but it makes it more cumbersome. So I guess I'm a believer in let's do this. Let's take it one step at a time. There's a reason that this body meets every year. We need to tweak it. We can tweak it next year, the year after. That's my thoughts, Mr. Chairman.
Turn my mic on. Any other questions? Okay, thank you for being here, your testimony. Okay, next, go ahead, Ms. Urbacate.
Good morning, committee. Mr. Chairman, Lori Urbacate with the Wyoming Realtors. The people sitting behind me in the bright blue, they're realtors as well. Specifically to this bill, we believe that we have a longstanding policy that we would support any legislation that will help people stay in their homes. And obviously, we're very well aware of what the prices have done and how they have impacted the residential real estate taxes. So we appreciate your work on this, on these issues. On this bill specifically, we also firmly believe that any tax relief needs to be very targeted. There are definitely a lot of people in Wyoming over 65 that have lived here for more than 30 years and have paid taxes for more than 30 years and do not need a tax break. But that being said, keeping it simple and across the board, okay. So I don't have to jump up and talk to each of these bills, and I promise I won't. We do support the rebate. We support expanding that. We support targeted tax relief for those that need it. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to try and answer questions.
Okay, any questions from Ms. Urbacate? Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. Okay, Mr. Ryman, go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Jeremiah Riemann here on behalf of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. I won't offer a position relative to this bill or the other bills this morning. We'll finalize our positions over the course of the next couple of days. So I appreciate the approach you're taking with this and other bills that will allow us to provide you firm positions on things. I want to say relative to this particular piece of legislation, it really has the potential to help certain circumstances and appropriately so. We have a lot of counties where assessed valuations have gone up considerably and people on fixed incomes, particularly the elderly, are unable to meet those property tax demands. And this will certainly help them. I do want to provide perhaps a little bit of caution because we have some other counties with demographics that might fit this particular area, and you might have a significantly detrimental effect to the residential property tax collections in those particular jurisdictions. I'll just offer up another example. Last year, there was a bill that actually, I believe it made it out of the House, which looked at implementing permanent license plates if your vehicle was over a certain age, and that made a lot of sense until we really dug into the data and found in Niobrara County, the vast majority of the vehicles that were registered there were well over that particular limit. And it would have had a serious impact for them. So I'm just urging some caution. Perhaps you should consider establishing a means test in here. So in other words, if your property taxes or perhaps your mortgage is over a certain point of your total income, then you would absolutely qualify for this program. If it's a very insignificant part of your income, then perhaps you shouldn't qualify for this. So that's one option. You could certainly look at a sunset so that we could evaluate the impacts of this legislation in a couple of years. And if it's not all that detrimental, let's continue it. If it is, let's see if we shouldn't tweak it. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Okay. Vice Chair Oakley has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Riemann. So I was thinking about what you said, and we certainly understand, like you said, and Ms. Urberkite said as well, there's going to be maybe some that don't need it and may even be happy to pay their taxes. But I was thinking similarly situated in different jurisdictions, since you used that comparison. So if somebody bought a house, let's say in Teton for $150,000 30 years ago, and it's now appraised at $1 million market value, versus if somebody bought a house for $150,000 in Fremont and now its market value is $250,000. So they have been, so the same similarly situated people, but in different counties, and that person in Teton County has been paying increasingly higher taxes. And so I guess my thought is it might hit those jurisdictions that you're talking about, but isn't it true that maybe that's okay, that we are trying to hit for some of those counties that have increased so much?
Hey, Mr. Riemann.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Oakley, absolutely. That's a possibility. And that's where perhaps if you applied a means test, it would apply differently. Obviously, wages are different in the counties. The income that you've saved is different in each circumstance. So I think there are ways we can address that, but yeah, absolutely. We want to be providing the benefit to those that deserve to have that benefit, absolutely.
Storr has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Riemann, my understanding is this bill doesn't have a state backfill, so to speak, so the burden is coming on the counties and the schools. Is that your agreement as well? And would you support a state backfill for this bill?
Okay, Mr. Riemann.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Storr, yeah, you're correct. This bill does not have any form of backfill. In fact, with the exception of one bill that you're going to consider, none of them include a backfill. It certainly makes it easier to swallow some of these proposals if there's a backfill on that. You are making the decision for local governments. Making options is another approach at some of this, so that my folks can be making those decisions, or the school boards, et cetera. So there are different approaches that we can take, but this is one of the lesser fiscal impacts, at least in terms of the analysis that's here. But we won't know that until reality hits, and that's perhaps where a sunset could be of some value so that we can evaluate that impact.
Okay, seeing no further questions. Thank you for your testimony here today. Okay, Mr. Lecoq, go ahead. Introduce yourself.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, committee members. I'm Tom Laycock with AARP Wyoming. We're a membership organization for what Mr. Moline so eloquently said is the less young. I want to thank you very much for taking in comments from your constituents, especially those who are age 50 and older, on this issue. This is something we still receive probably the most emails, the most phone calls about. We appreciate that you're looking into this as a way to offer some of that targeted tax relief to older adults. So that said, I'll be quick as I see the chairs filling up quickly. Happy to take any questions though.
Any questions? Okay, thank you for being here. Oh, would you have a question, Representative Storr?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Laycock, certainly, I know from speaking to my constituents in Teton County, a number of the elderly that are impacted by the increase in property values and a resulting increase in property taxes. But we also have a lot of young people in the state that are just really challenged to be able to even purchase property or are renting, and they wouldn't benefit from this. I'm just curious if you've thought about, whether there's other ideas out there that could help both ends of the spectrum.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Story, that's a great point. I remember back, I'm got the gray hair, but I'm not so old to have not remembered when I was trying to buy my first house. And a little bit would have gone a long way. By the same token, the folks that you're looking at on this end of the spectrum tend to be a little bit past working age in a lot of cases, and so it's tough to sort of find that second job, that new job, something along those lines. But that said, I absolutely respect what you're saying and why I fully understand it.
Questions? Okay, Mr. Laycock, thank you for being here. Go ahead, next. Welcome.
Good morning. Excuse me, Emily Parvasini, Sublette County Treasurer, also President of the County Treasurers Association. We are speaking today, this is a good bill, except it maybe need a little tiny bit of tweaking here and there. Please keep it simple. No tiers. We've got enough on our plates that we don't need more stuff that just makes it muddy the water, so to speak. We also ask that we keep it focused on those people that are no longer working 2 and 3 jobs and don't have the ability or cannot at this point in their careers change careers to make more money to pay their taxes. The elderly definitely need that bit of help as they have reached the point where they're on fixed incomes. They don't want to have to work anymore. My mom, when she retired from teaching school in Fremont County after 30 years, worked at Walmart for 10 years to help pay, to make the ends meet. I get it. But we need to keep this focused on those people that really need it. I think that the county treasurers, their only concern really for this bill was the spouses being included, as there may be some spouses that are very significantly not qualified for this program. Their older spouse that is qualified passes away and they continue to get this exemption for the next 35, 40 years. That could be very significant for counties that could use those revenue dollars. Because at the end of the day, these dollars go to schools and they go to our special districts and they pay for roads. Teton County is one of the most expensive places in the world to pave. So, those kinds of things have to be taken into consideration also. And I stand for any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the treasurer, Representative Storr?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just curious whether you support the means testing idea and whether that would be possible for the treasurers to implement reasonably well as compared to the tiers.
Treasurer? Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chairman, Representative Storr, as long as it is something that's manageable, numbers, dollars, cents, people-wise. I don't know what that testing looks like, and so without looking at it and knowing what that test is, I couldn't speak for all of the treasurers. I just don't know.
Seeing no further questions, treasurer, thanks for being
Thank
here
you.
and thank you for your service. Okay, next. Who's going next?
Mr. Chairman, I'll
Okay.
go next if that's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning. My name is Erin Taylor. I'm the Executive Director of the Wyoming Association of Community College Trustees. And Mr. Chairman, I think like you heard from Mr. Riemann earlier, the Trustees Association was meeting later this week to really kind of talk about where they stand on all of these bills. We've been watching them very closely, working with our friends at the counties, special districts, et cetera. Because as you know, this has an impact on the counties or the colleges for those who have taxing districts. So, and it's different across the board. As you know, a mill levy raises a different amount of money in Sweetwater County as it does in Goshen County, as it does in Park County. So they're leaning towards the idea of targeted relief but we'll know more about where they land later. So I just ask you, if you have questions about the impacts that on the colleges, we'd be happy to share more information with you if you so desire. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, very good. Thank you for your testimony today. Who's next? Mr. Winnie?
Mr. Chairman, Bill Winnie, Sublette County, speaking for myself. One of the things that you are struggling with is the elements of our Constitution specifying how this would be handled were formulated and passed in a time when gold was $20 an ounce and inflation was not a facet of federal policy. And so you're trying to look beyond that because you want a fair evaluation of property. But then in some places, we've heard Teton County mentioned the run-up in prices or valuations goes far beyond inflation. County commissioners need the money for inflation when costs of goods and services go up. They got to pay those. They got to deliver what they deliver. But there's a windfall element in some counties when these prices go far beyond that. And that is the element you're struggling with, is those things rising up under people on fixed incomes, people on retirement. In my VFW post, we recently discussed a pay raise for employees. They hadn't had a pay raise in like 8 years. And if you look over the numbers of inflation for the past 8 years, it's been pretty healthy. And we did in fact pass one, but these other things are just rising up underneath them. You also need to look at the cost of elders that are pushed out of their homes because of taxes and the cost to keep them in an elder care facility versus what the cost might have been had they remained in their own home. And that's where the exemption helps. There's a quirk in here that you also need to look at, and that is your military members. I took Wyoming as my home state in 1978. I would, under the 30-year rule, not be eligible for any of this until 2035 because of my military service, where I was on active duty away from the state and didn't own any real property in the state. So you need to take a look at that. Another thing you should look at is agricultural property that remains in agricultural service as opposed to being sold off for other uses. And so I don't have any good solutions for any of those with you. Those are the problems you're dealing with, that constitutional limits of $20 an ounce and non-inflationary federal government. And then here we are today where that is what's going on, and yet the laws haven't figured that out yet. And so something like this, I think 30 years is a bit onerous, and we've heard other people talk to it. I think you need to look at your military and how you might handle them. And finally, the issue of agricultural property remaining in agricultural service, whether it's within the family or other families, is another element. Subject to your questions, thank you.
Okay, any questions? Mr. Winnie, Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Winnie, you've pointed out some real flaws. There are certainly some people who are being missed by this particular bill. One of my criticisms of this bill is it's a very narrow group of people that it's providing some relief to. So based on what you've explained to us here today, do you believe that a broader approach that covers more of the citizenry would be a better approach?
Yes.
Winnie?
Yeah, yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Okay, very good. Any other questions? Representative Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Another quick question. Just, you'd talked about 30 years being onerous. If you threw out a number, what would that be? If you could just give me your thoughts.
Mr. Chairman, if I was to throw out a number, I'd say something like 10 years, or perhaps you've heard about the means test. That could be an element too. In the world of retirement incomes, my retirement incomes are inflation adjusted, and so I'm probably not going to be subject to or eligible for a means test per se. But there are those that are on fixed incomes that are not inflation adjusted, very clearly would need something like that.
Representative Storr has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Winnie, for being here. I'd like to just ask you a personal question, whether you applied to the refund program last year and were you eligible?
I was not eligible.
Mr. Winnie worked through the
I-
chair there. Yeah. Hey, we're all out of
Mr.
practice.
Chairman.
That's good.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and Representative Storr, as I indicated, my retirement income is such that it is inflation adjusted, and I would not qualify with some kind of a means test or I forget the word you used.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just as a follow-up, so the refund program does exempt retirement income from consideration. Was that not the case when you went through the application?
Go ahead, Mr. Winnie.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Storr, I looked over the refund program and concluded that I was not eligible because of the income I receive.
All right, thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Winnie, any other questions? Okay, Mr. Winnie, thanks for being here. Appreciate your service. Thank you. Okay, next, go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Morning.
My name is Tammy Johnson, and I am the Executive Director for AFL-CIO, and I'm also a 35-year resident of Wyoming, approaching that number as you are, that age number. I'm a bit concerned about this bill for a few reasons, and I'm not speaking in opposition, but I'm speaking as this isn't really the solution that we need. Our taxes in Wyoming are the lowest, some of the lowest in the nation. This is the only stable funding that we have for some of our most necessary services, especially schools. So this is not subject to the volatility of the oil market and global impacts and things like that, where we've seen it. We've seen the years when school funding is badly hit because of low coal prices, low oil prices, things like that. But property taxes have always been the same or rising. So I'm concerned about that for the health of our school system. I'm also concerned that this is a stopgap to what is the real problem in Wyoming, which is wages for workers. And Representative Storr, you talked about the younger workers, and we've talked about older workers. Your very state employees and teachers in this state have not had a cost of living adjustment to their pensions since 2007. I can only imagine salaries at that time. I was teaching, the highest salary was around 60,000. Those were the people at the top of the salary schedule. So their salaries were locked in a place that put them at a pension that's based on that number. And now, even now, the people retiring from state government, we're never going to see a COLA as long as I live. And as long as the people who are currently working, as long as they're alive, they're not going to see a COLA under the current rules. So these problems with natural things going up like inflation and the cost of property taxes, that's all built into a structured system to fund a steady income to our schools and the other services. But what we don't have is a response to that on the other end of wages, where the people who are stuck, or even young people who have the flexibility to move as their career grows, the wages in this state are not keeping up with the wages in surrounding states. And I will tell you from the work that I do in the labor industry, we will be lucky if we can get workers to come to this state and work on the projects that are coming, because our wages and our prevailing wage is so low, and there's work in other places. So workers are going to look at Wyoming last. And we have some very important projects coming to the state that will do a lot for our economy. But we don't want to have that conversation about wages. And I know that's not what this bill is about. But I'm telling you, there's a structural system here that's bigger than property tax issue, that we're going to do a stopgap for 2 or 3 years or whatever the sunset date will be. And everybody's going to feel good about it. And then what's going to happen when that sunset goes away and the wages haven't been addressed and nothing else has changed, but we still need those property taxes. So I worry that this is just a Band-Aid for a bigger picture in growing our state's economy and making sure our working families have the resources they need to stay in their homes, to feed their families, to retire with dignity, and all those things that are very important to Wyoming's values. So I thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, very good. Any questions, Ms. Johnson? Okay, thank you for
Okay,
being here.
thank you.
Okay, next.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman,
Good morning.
members of the committee. My name is Dixie Huxtable. I am the Converse County Assessor. Today I'm here as a legislative chair for the Wyoming County Assessors Association, and I've brought our president, Mel Schinkel from Teton County, with me up here. I appreciate the opportunity to make the comments on all the bills for this morning. Last week, our association met. We had all 23 assessors participate, which is kind of a record for us. We were very excited for that. We tried to go through all the bills that had already been listed and numbered. We understand the need for property tax relief. We get those people at our county every day. So the unanimous agreement was we need some property tax relief for our taxpayers. Then the diversity started happening because our counties are so different. Sitting beside the Teton County assessor on one side and the Goshen County assessor on the other side, a lot of these property tax relief bills became a very hot topic. And while our group supports property tax relief, we do support it. In most cases, we do support it with a targeted relief. The most popular and unanimous decision was the property tax refund program. Don't lose that. Whether you expand it, whether you do something different, it helped people in every one of our counties, and we saw the benefit for that. Most assessors stepped out of their comfort zone to go try to bring people in to be aware of that program, work with their treasurers to get that program going. So that was the number one support that we had. Exemptions also had a lot of support, whether it was homeowners exemption or some other type of exemption, because it targets relief, hopefully, and it's pre-tax relief. So you're taking that burden of paying the tax off instead of having to pay it and then get a refund. And then the last topic was the caps or the limits, which because of diversification across the state, there was a lot of talk about what fits and what doesn't fit and what's going to hurt somebody and what's going to help somebody. But in specific for House Bill 3, administering this bill, we had just a couple of comments to make. As far as the specifics with 65 years or 30 years, we're going to presume that the affidavit's going to cover that. Whatever document is prescribed by the Department of Revenue, taxpayers will fill that out completely and bring it to our desk, and we will administer it. There is not an opportunity, and we do not want the opportunity to investigate those affidavits. We don't have the resources, the ability to prove age, to prove 30 years of tax receipts. We don't want to do that. That's not within our resource capability. As long as the affidavit is signed properly and executed properly, we will administer it to the best of our ability. There was a comment made on page 3 about the surviving spouse. Just a comment about that on the veterans exemptions. The surviving spouse is eligible for that when the veteran is deceased if they do not remarry. So there are some qualifications within that program that may want to be considered here if that's a concern. So somebody's deceased and then the spouse remarries, maybe that would be a trigger to not allow that. Also, we talked about the 1 acre land on page 5 where it talks about shall include up to 1 acre. Certainly we will administer it if that's how it comes out. You have people that have residential property with less than 1 acre, and you've got some that have 2,000 acres that are not ag. They just have 2,000 of residential acres. So for us, the challenge would be to work with the department with the software to figure out how to automate that calculation of 1 acre. And there's various ways of valuing the land. You got linear, you got MRA, you got all kinds of methods that might make that a little more complicated. So if there wanted to be a change to that to say associated residential or whatever this group feels would be appropriate, we will administer whatever you put in there, but knowing that 1 acre is going to take a little bit of management behind the scenes to calculate that 1 acre, is something that we would have to work on. Other than that, I think we're ready to stand forward and help administer it. Based on the application process, there's just not a way to do it this year, and I understand that. So we did consider this a long-term sort of fix for our people. The assessors really see the need for some immediate, which is where that property tax relief program comes in. This was more of a long-term, as in it's going to be something that happens in a future year. So with that, I would stand for any questions, or I would allow my colleague to answer any questions if anybody has any comments.
Any questions? Representative Storr?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Huxtable, to me here today, and Ms. Schenkel. Great to see you, Mel. It may be a twofold question, thinking about that 1 acre issue. And so thinking about how counties pull out the residents in what is otherwise an ag property. And does the 1 acre make sense there, or does it just, is that typical that it's 1 acre that would be a residential property, or is there some other way that the assessors figure out what's residential and what isn't, and what's ag? And then especially Mel, some of our constituents in Teton County who really need this kind of help, they'll also probably qualify for the refund program. But I can think of a number of long-term residents who have older homes on larger acreage, residential acreage. And it's actually the value of the residential acreage that has a high value, because it's a 5 or 10 acre lot. So how do you see this actually helping them? Thanks.
Mr. Chairman?
Ms. Huxtable.
I'll take a stab at the first one, then I'll turn it over to Mel, Representative Storr. So in agriculture specifically, the 1 acre makes some sense in that language, because typically across the state, there is 1 acre per habitable house pulled off as residential at market value versus the ag. Now, it can vary because there's always those special circumstances where it's more than 1 acre or potentially less. But for ag land, that makes some logical sense because that's close to what's being pulled off anyway. It's the other parcels where in some counties, the valuation is defined by using the first acre at a certain rate, and then every acre after that is a different rate, kind of a graduated method or an MRA method. And it works. They get to fair market value for all of it, but everybody has basically the same base area of dirt. And so, the methodology of just taking the total residential land divided by the number of acres, get a per acre rate, is an option. And that would probably be something that could be done with the assistance of the DOR and the CAMA. But if that's not the intent of the legislation, then we want to make sure we're clear on that before we start doing it straight that way.
Ms. Huxtable, so what I wrote when you gave that testimony was just get rid of that 1 acre, includes associated land, or the dwelling is
Mr. Chairman, that is certainly an option to do.
Yeah.
And every account.
And then you kind of stay within your current rules of how you do things. So
Mr. Chairman, I believe that would be true, that we could do that, because typically every residential house has residential land associated with it.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, very good. Thank you, Ms. Schenkel. Good morning, welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Melissa Schenkel, Teton County Assessor. Representative Storr, as Dixie just mentioned, in Teton County particularly, because our land values are very erratic, doing something like an associated lands language in this bill would be helpful. In many instances, the land is far more valuable than the improvements in Teton County. And, exempting 50% on up to 1 acre, wouldn't help a whole lot in many cases in Teton County, specifically, of course. But certainly anything is better than nothing. Thank you.
No questions. Thank you, ladies. Appreciate your service to your counties and our states. Thank you for being here today. Okay, next, in favor of the bill, go ahead. Introduce yourself and who you represent.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, committee, my name's Dan Sabrowski. I'm a precinct person in Natrona County, and I hadn't planned to really speak on the bill. I'm somewhat in favor of it. Any bit of tax relief definitely is welcome. As, you know, conservative ideology, it definitely doesn't go far enough for me, but it's definitely a good start. As I listen to the testimony of others, especially government agencies, and the years of following politics, it never seems that government has enough money. No matter how much is being brought in, it's still never enough. We spend nearly $20,000 a child in education, some of the highest in the country, but yet still not enough for some reason, not really understanding how we continue to grow government. Ronald Reagan proved to us, and I would suggest maybe sometime in the future, if we could possibly look at, as complicated like listening to the assessors, property taxes get so complicated. Any proposal just sends this ripple through the whole system on who it affects and doesn't affect. I would suggest that if we could ever do it, scrap the property tax system. And I'll explain why. As a contractor in Natrona County, I've heard, especially the last couple of years, people are not wanting to expand their properties, add on, build shops, because they're worried, what is that gonna do to their property taxes? So that stifles economic activity. And as Ronald Reagan showed us in the 80s, you lower the tax burden, you're gonna create economic activity. And if the simplest tax we have is our sales tax. And I don't know what that calculation would be. I've never sat down to figure it out. I don't know if I'm smart enough, but if it's a 2 or 3% increase on our sales tax to trade out the property tax, that would be the simplest and fairest. And although I don't want to flood the government with money because it just continues to grow government, but I have a feeling the windfall on that type of flip, because the economic activity would see a lot of windfall, a lot of revenue for the state. So anyway, that was my 2 cents.
Okay, very good. Thanks for being here. I got a little bill coming you're gonna really like.
Cool. All right, I look
More on
forward to
that
it.
later, but any questions for Mr. Sabrowski?
Yes.
No, I think you're right. I appreciate your testimony. Okay, Representative Storr, go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do believe that there's a difference in volatility between sales tax and property tax. Property tax is a much more stable source of revenues. Is that something you've thought about in your thinking?
Mr. Sabrowski.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Storr, I could talk for a while on this, because when I truly get down in the weeds of property taxes, I think they're immoral. And the reason why is because you never own your property. To me, as an American citizen, that's an immoral concept. If I was to pay off my house, then I rent it from the government. And at the point of the gun, I have to pay those. I mean, if you followed it to its ending conclusion, if I refuse to pay my property taxes and I don't leave my house, what eventually happens? A sheriff shows up with his guns and says, no, you're out of here. That idea is so un-American. Now, sales tax, because we got to have some limited form of government. I mean, it's just how society functions. So the sales tax, I believe with the economic activity with other taxes being, because I believe if we lowered our severance tax, you would generate even more economy there. Wages would go up, exploration would expand, companies would come to Wyoming. We're an expensive place to drill. So like I say, the Reagan model, you start lowering those taxes across the board, the economic activity will create the windfall. And I don't know that it would be that volatile. I think it would be pretty sustainable.
Okay, and I appreciate, okay, one more question down here, Representative Block.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
So real quickly, you're a contractor, as I hear it. And so can you tell me, so in the last, we've seen property taxes escalate in the last 3 to 4 years. I know in my district, it's gone up anywhere from 70 to some people well over 100% in that time frame. Have you actually seen that decrease in people concerned with additional construction? Have you seen that cut in construction to private homes? Have you seen that pull back?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman,
Zarowski.
Representative Locke, you know, I haven't seen any numbers. It's just, you know, conversation in the community. Talk with people. Probably 2 conversations I've had with people that would like to expand their homes or build a shop on their property. But their property taxes have gone up so significantly the past 3 years, 4 years, that it's not worth the effort. You know, you put a shop on your land, you're adding another couple $100 a month in property taxes potentially. So the numbers, no, I'm just talking maybe anecdotal, just from conversations I've had with other citizens. So, but I'm sure that rings out true in a lot of people, so.
Okay, very good. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your testimony. And okay, as we're nearing the halfway point of our time in this meeting with 2 more bills to hear, I'd just give us a nudge to keep moving along. So good morning, welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and I will keep this brief. I'm not speaking for or against. I was thinking back when I was reading all of these bills.
And your name is?
Oh, I'm sorry. Marty Hartzog. I'm chairman of the Board of Equalization, three-member board that hears tax appeals and works with the assessors on regulating the manner in which taxes or valuations are determined. So this took me back to law school in a sense. Whenever I look at something like these, and really true of all of the tax bills, it was an issue finding process. And the 2 issues that jumped out at me right away, which kind of compelled me to speak, was the uniformity and equality in taxation provision. That's still in the Constitution, and it's not changed through House Joint 1. That's still in there, and in fact, it's required even at the subclass level. And so, and you may be asking, well, we have lots of exemptions that create exceptions for certain people, and that is true. But there's something different here. Those exemptions are so narrowly applied, and they're usually need-based. It's usually dealing with the way property is used, as is true with nonprofits or churches or the government. The veterans are an exemption that apply based on your status, but very narrow, and there's a clear policy for doing it. And here you have, you're creating a class of persons that simply live here for 30 years and pay taxes and are 65 years or older. And whether they need the help or not, they're going to have a 50% exemption of their taxes. And you can have all of the other people that are basically in the same boat, except they haven't paid taxes for 30 years, and they're not going to get the same benefit. So the two provisions that jumped to mind were the uniformity and equality in taxation, and it's important. And I'm gonna point out the word is taxation, not valuation. Taxation. So that's a little bigger than how you value the properties. That's how you apply the property taxes and the tax system as a whole. So something to remember. The other word, of course, is equal protection. With equal protection, you're basically in an area of the law where the government is creating winners and losers through some kind of class. One class gets a benefit, the other class, or everyone else doesn't. And the way that equal protection works is the closer you get to arbitrary classes where there's not you're not trying to do something very important, the more difficult it is to sustain that class and treat them differently. So here you have a class of persons that are simply Wyoming residents who have paid taxes for 30 years and are 65 years or older, and you are saying those people are going to get a 50% tax break, and others are not. And kind of echoing what you've already heard, there's nothing needs-based. Usually your exemptions are easily defendable when they're needs-based, and there's nothing needs-based here. So that's the concern I would just offer you as in terms of of a legal analysis. I haven't tried to follow that through and determine whether something like this is vulnerable to challenge, but the equal protection ramifications are pretty clear. And so I just throw that out there for your consideration. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Representative Swanitzer has a question.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. It's a question along the veterans' property tax exemption, because that seems to be the closest I can find to something that doesn't matter if you retire a sergeant or a general, you get, you know, it says $3,000 exemption. Do you, I guess, has the board had any cases dealing with that veterans exemption? And is that, I mean, comparable in your mind to what we're trying to do here as something that some of the concerns you have, those concerns should also be apparent, I would think, in the veterans tax exemption. Just any comment on that?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Swanitzer, we have not had any issues with that. It's really, most of the exemptions occur after the valuation process. You know, the valuation is what it is, and then the tax bill is, okay, you pay X% of your taxes because you're a veteran. It kind of comes close, but it is very targeted as well, and there's a strong public policy for rewarding, you know, people for their sacrifice and so forth. And again, veterans exemptions have been in existence forever. I'm not sure. I'll have to look for a comparable situation here in another state where you're simply saying you lived here this long, you pay taxes for 30 years. That's the criteria. You don't pay but 50% of your taxes. That's one that is quite a bit broader in concept. And I think that's where it gets you into kind of a tricky area with the equal protection and with the uniformity provisions.
Any other questions, Representative Bear?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you'll indulge me, I mean, this would be a great opportunity for me to ask some questions that are a little bit more general than just this one bill. Mr. Hartzog.
Let's stick to the bill for sure. Yeah,
Okay,
we're working on the bill.
I'll certainly try. You know, we're really talking about the difference between Article 15, Section 11 and Section 12 here, and which is going to take precedent. But you mentioned that there is clear policy for applying these types of exemptions. Can you explain, is that in your policy that, or is this in statute? Where would one find this clear policy that you're describing?
Mr. Hartzog?
Chairman Harshman, Representative Bear, I'm not sure I follow you. I'm simply saying that when you look at the Constitution, you have the two provisions that are there, and the exemptions are tricky because, you know, we always think of everything in terms of value, and by using exemptions, of which there are many, you are deciding that no matter what the value, we're going to change the tax bill, whatever, and apply it administratively. And all I'm saying is that in terms of what the Constitution says, it says that taxation has to be uniform. So when you use exemptions, then of course there are many in Section 105 of all of the tax chapters. You look at them and you see that they're very narrow, and there's usually the use of property that's the driver. Typically, you have religious uses, you have nonprofits using it for some kind of societal benefit, and here where you have the comparable is the veterans. That's the one where it doesn't have anything to do with the use of the property as much as it is the sacrifice and recognizing the benefit to the person. And all I'm saying is we don't see this kind of exemption that's applied so broadly across all of the population based strictly on how old you are and how many years you paid taxes. I think that one is kind of, you're in the deep end of the equal protection and uniform taxation analyses, and I think you're going to want to at least check into it. I haven't figured all that out yet, and I think it also will come up with some of the other bills too. But in terms of the statute, no, it's not in there.
You know, I think just as when we were working this bill, kind of doing the research we did on it, I mean, we wouldn't be the only state. You know, there's nearly half the states, many of them will freeze when you get to that level, and so It's an interesting point, though, you bring up. Representative Bear, please continue.
I think you've explained it pretty well. But, you know, you mentioned narrowly applied and needs-based. I was just curious where that direction is coming from. I agree with that statement. I understand it more in general terms, but is it written somewhere where that guidance comes from?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Baird, no, it's really just a review of all of the exemptions that exist. They tend to be fairly narrowly applied, and in most cases, they're associated with the type of use of a property. And you can think of all of the charitable uses or the nonprofit use. I mean, all of those it doesn't matter who they are, it's how the property is used. So it's very specific. And when we see those cases, they have to go through quite a rigorous review by us and the courts and the Department of Revenue or the county assessor as to exactly how they're using that property. And there's lots of those cases. And the narrowly applied is simply a focus on who generally gets those. And you just don't see exemptions apply to, right across the board to everybody. Usually exemptions are far more targeted. And this is an instance where you're trying to use the exemption to give people relief, which I get. It's just that the uniformity and equality of taxation starts to really, I think, quake a little, just because at what point have you abandoned that concept? And then again, you have to have a great reason under the equal protection. And there's a whole analysis there that you don't want to hear about today, but.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one final question. Based on this, we're clearly going into new territory with this type of an exemption. We see a lot of this in several other bills. Have you seen legal challenges based on this type of inequality?
Mr. Hartzog.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Bear, I have not done that analysis and looked in other states. So in Wyoming, I don't think we've ever seen anything quite like this in terms of the law. So I can't tell you that I have, no.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Hartzog, and I think it's fascinating, and we appreciate your testimony, and you think of the sales tax exemptions. You think there's a few in the property tax, holy cow. And, from the exemption to food to all the services, all those things that are very broad, It's an interesting discussion you bring up, though. So we appreciate your testimony. Okay, thank you. Okay, are there, yeah, appreciate it. Anybody else before, we'd like to close public comment if we can. Mr. Whitney, you're going to take 2 bites of the apple. Okay, real brief, please.
Mr. Chairman, Bill Winnie, Sublette County. One minor thought, the veterans exemption came up. We've talked about time horizons for applicability of these. The veterans exemption doesn't apply till the veteran has lived in his home for 3 years. So there's another one of your time limits, subject to questions. Thank you.
Yeah, the question on that too, and that the veteran could just move here. It doesn't have to be a veteran like yourself who claimed Wyoming as his residence when he went.
As I understand it, yes, sir.
Yeah, that's right. Could move here from anywhere. Not like yourself. Okay, very good. Thank you. Mr. Winnie, I think you're gonna have a question here. Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just real briefly, I know I looked at this veterans exemption, and maybe you can clarify it for me, but it is very narrow-based, is it not? It's not every veteran that can qualify for this. It has to be veterans that have been certain actions and have received certain ribbons, that type of thing. Is that accurate?
That's accurate. I couldn't repeat them for you.
Through the chair, yeah.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Representative Bear, I couldn't repeat them for you. But yes, they are specific requirements that I had to look at and did qualify under.
Yeah, very good. Appreciate that. Okay, any other? Thank you, Mr. Winnie. Appreciate. Okay, committee, appreciate all your thoughtful questions. Anyone else here would like the final support of this bill? Okay, we've finished with Mr. Winnie, started with Mr. Brown. Appreciate everybody in between, all your testimony today. We're going to close public comment now. Committee members, what's your pleasure here on House Bill number 3? Have a motion, Representative Zwanster?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd move to lay the bill back until our Thursday meeting at 8 a.m.
Okay.
I guess, yeah, I can lay it back to a certain date and time would be my motion, and I don't think it's debatable then.
Okay. This is not debatable. I was hoping we'd amend it a little bit and then lay it back, but
Well, then let
that's
me
okay.
rescind that motion
Okay.
and let me move the bill, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, for this.
Okay, so the motion is to move the bill. Second? Is there a second? Second by Representative Northrop. Okay, yeah, we're all out of practice a little bit. It's good. Okay. All right, folks, let's work through this bill page by page. House Bill 3. Okay, are there any questions or amendments on page 1? And I'm flipping over now to page 2 and 3. You're looking at me. Members, any questions or amendments on pages 2 or 3? Did I see a hand? Vice Chair, and then Representative Locke. So Vice Chair Oakley and then Representative Locke, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I don't have the language. I just, I'm looking at page 3, top paragraph. I wanted to add the language that was referred to by Ms. Huxtable about unless remarried. And then I guess, I don't know if we can do this, but she mentioned that it's somewhere else in the statute. Maybe we could refer back so that if we don't get the perfect language, page 3.
Yeah,
Are you
no,
on-
and
oh.
it's on 2 as well. Yep, very good.
So if we can do a conceptual, and then I can work with staff, refer to other statute and put it in there. But the idea being, there is this the surviving spouse of a person who qualified would not, who would not otherwise qualify under this paragraph shall continue to qualify unless remarried. That's is the motion.
Okay. Everybody understand that motion? Is there a second? Okay, it's been seconded. Any further discussion? We all understand that, and it's just a concept. We'll get it worked in. But the idea is that the surviving spouse, once they remarry, would no longer, unless they qualify another way, but, okay. Any discussion? I'm looking for discussion. I don't see any. Okay, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that motion's been adopted. Are there any other amendments on page 2 or 3? Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, Representative Locke, my apologies. Go
Thank you,
ahead.
Mr. Chairman. I would just propose, I know we've heard a couple of people bring up the fact that decreasing the number would be a thought and a recommendation, and I would agree with that. I don't know if 10 years is right or 15 years. Maybe I would propose, I'll go for that halfway point. I'll use the 15-year. And I'd just like to move that we adjust that down.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, it's been seconded by Representative Strzok. Any further discussion? Then the motion is to move it to 15, from 30 to 15 on line 9, page 2, as I understand that. Okay, Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I oppose that and will be a no vote. We've had a lot of discussion about this and we're looking at different ways of getting there, but this is a concept about long-term home ownership in Wyoming, people who have pitched in, paid their taxes and had that, maybe that bigger increase over time. So I think in order to keep this concept, I mean, if we go down, I mean, maybe 25, but for me, it guts the concept to start getting it at 15. That becomes much, much broader and will have a much, much bigger fiscal impact. So certainly as to 15, I'll be a no.
Okay, any other discussion on the amendment? Okay, Representative Zwanser?
Thanks. Since it's still like philosophical discussion, I mean, my concern overall with the bill is you don't want to attract people to say, hey, I'm going to go to Wyoming and retire there, and knowing that they're going to get a property tax reduction in 15 years. I mean, if you look at our demographics right now, every projection says the only age group we're increasing is those over 65 for the next 30 years, and which is continuing to imbalance our entire economy. And so my concern is my concern is actually the 65 and that it's residential property tax paid. So this doesn't matter how long you've lived in Wyoming. If you've rented, issues, you had to actually own property that you were paying residential property tax on, which, there's a lot of people nowadays that aren't getting houses until 35 or 40. All that being said, I think I'd be agreeable to the amendment if the sponsor would be agreeable to raising the age to 70. I'm trying to find that sweet, and I know we can play with the numbers, but if you're still being able to work, let me see if that would be a friendly amendment to move on line 7 to make it 70 years of age.
Sponsor?
And you can say no, I just thought I'd ask.
I'd have to say, I'd accept that as an adjustment, so.
Okay, so that amendment then is now 70 on line 7 and 15 on 9. That's how I read it.
Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion on the amendment of 70 and 15? Representative Oakley wants another shot at this. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I oppose that as well. Again, I think we're completely changing the concept. It's not just about, to me, it's a dual concept. And the idea that the elderly people who move here are the ones that will receive it. I would qualify for this before even the 65. And I'm not trying to make it about me, but the point is, then I will have owned my home and paid taxes in Wyoming for 30 years. The idea is, like I say, it's a dual concept, and we're getting away from both as far as I can see.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, I think we're ready to vote on this amendment. All those in favor of the amendment of 70 and 15, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no.
No.
The chair is in doubt. All those in favor, raise your hand. Okay, 1, 2, 3. All those opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The chair's hearing, it's not very good. Okay, that motion has failed. Okay, any other amendments on page 2 or 3? Okay, flipping over to page 4. Members, I wrote after number 5 on 12, so this would be like line 15. I wrote number 6 would be the definition of military veteran who counted Wyoming as their home state. So if you joined the service 35 years ago and you've been all over the world, but Wyoming, you always had a Wyoming driver's license. So that's what I put in there. I know, you haven't paid property taxes, but anyway, that's that. I am not making that motion because I'm the chair right now, but I just wanted to tell you that was a note I had. Okay. And the other note I had, members, on 4 and 5, was at the bottom of 23, the assessors talked about this, taking the last 2 words on the bottom of page 4, up to 1, and then over on 5, 1 acre of land, and simply insert includes associated land. So that's all I put on that. Those were my notes. Anybody else have notes? Vice Chair Oakley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As to your first comment, I'm gonna make that motion for the military. Military where Wyoming was your home state, the
County
veteran.
of Wyoming is their home state.
So I would move that.
Second. And moved and seconded by Representative Northrup.
Mr. Chair, it's probably page 4. I'm guessing it's gonna be line 15, section 6.
That's what I
Pierre is
had.
where that would go.
In section 6 on line 15, page 4, be a new number 6. Okay? Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that motion's been adopted. Any other motions, page 4 or 5? Nobody's going on the associated land?
1 acre.
1 acre
One
assessor.
acre on page 5.
Okay, so Representative Strzok taking it off that up to 1 acre and inserting associated. So it reads, includes associated land where the dwelling is located. And that was a suggestion by our elected assessors.
Mr. Chairman.
And so that's the motion. Is there a second? It's seconded by Representative Swanser. Discussion, Representative Storr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just add in the word residential before land in there, just to make it clear.
I think, would you consider that friendly? That's a friendly amendment, so it reads associated residential land. Okay, and that is moved by Representative Strzok, seconded by Representative Swanitzer. Okay, discussion, Representative Northrup.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm against this in that I think that when you get over 5 acres of land or 10 acres of land, that you're starting to enter into a different realm on how much land is residential land. And so I'll be voting no.
Okay, Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with the good representative beside me. I wouldn't mind finding something, but I think just increasing all of it. I was struck by Assessor Shinkles. She said that other land can become far more valuable. Well, exactly. So now we're starting to include the fancy palatial. The reality is we're trying to do this at a targeted audience, and I think sort of that 1 acre of land in the house, there's already an ag exemption. So we are talking about the fancy high-end property. So it seems to me that maybe the 1 acre is appropriate.
Okay, any other discussion on that? Representative Bear.
Just a point of clarification, just a few numbers that are bouncing around in my head that might be helpful for the committee on this particular issue. It's my understanding that in Teton County, the land portion of the tax bills is 7.5% on average. Statewide, it's almost 30%. So if we exclude the land, we actually give preferential treatment to the Teton County residents.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, my issue is that, you know, there's, in my district, everybody has 1.5 acres, you know, in these subdivisions. And so I think by putting 1 acre, then you don't really get the associated land with it. I think the assessors already make those determinations, what's ag and what isn't, on a 10-acre piece or a 100-acre piece, whether it's in Teton or Goshen or whatever, whether it's ag or whether it's other use. And I'm seeing heads nod, but that's my limited understanding. I'm seeing more heads nod, okay, but I don't know. That's my comment on that. Okay, any further discussion on this amendment?
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Storr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to clarify, maybe one option would be to not have this apply to the high-end properties, but really there are, you know, small residences on 5 and 10 acre lots in my community that's why the value is in the land, but it's also not subdividable. So that is what their property is. And that's where we're trying to address this. So perhaps we could also include and consider a new numeral 7 that would be some sort of means test to apply.
That's a different issue than
Okay,
this one.
I'm just
right
going to
here.
throw it out there.
Okay, back on this amendment. Are there further discussion? Okay, seeing none, sensing you're ready to vote, all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
Okay, that has been adopted. Okay, there are other amendments on the bill. Okay, seeing no amendments, Representative Zwanzer.
At this point, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to lay House Bill 4 back until Thursday at 8 a.m. for our meeting.
Is the date certain? Okay. And that motion's not debatable. All those in favor? Question. It's been seconded by Representative Byron. All those in favor?
It's House Bill 3.
It's House Bill 3. Thank you. And to lay it back till Thursday. As I talked about in our comments at the beginning of the meeting, folks, if you're just joining us, we want to kind of work these bills, but lay them all back so we kind of know what we have for solutions, right? We don't want to pass to the conflicting bills or those kind of things. So we want to be able to kind of work it as a whole issue. Okay, so all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that bill's been laid back. Next bill for our consideration, and members, it's 926. It's House Bill 4, Property Tax Refund Program. Okay, does anybody any member of the committee want to explain this to the audience? Really, this is a program that we amended heavily last year. And really, I guess I'll just keep going and explain it. The real thing that we've done to this program is added tiers. And there's 5 tiers now instead of 1. And we did have a conversation about the income calculation. As I read the bill again last night, I don't think we made really any changes to the income calculation. But the issue that we heard in committee was, geez, I'm at 127% of county income and I got zero. You know, if I was 2% less, I'd qualify for the refund. So the committee thought about tiers. So that's really what the bill does. The other part, and you can see those tiers on the fiscal note, they're lined out there pretty good. You know, the other thing I've heard since is that, geez, maybe can you turn these tiers down a little bit? There might be too many of them, and it gets into the administration piece for our assessors and treasurers. Okay, so that's my quick explanation. Any members, any comment or want to add to that explanation for the public, or we'll go right to public comment now? Okay, and we'll start with Revenue Department Chair, Director, I should say, Ms. Henson. Please come and, since I've introduced you, introduce yourself again, and we'll get started.
Good morning, committee. Brenda Henson, Director of the Department of Revenue. Thank you for your time this morning. I thought it might be helpful to provide you with some of the information related to this bill, and the LSO staff are handing out a document. What this document provides to you are we now have the 2023 income numbers, and we also have the 2023 property tax amounts. So you'll see a 2-page document, and the first thing I'd like to do is to just draw your attention to the first page with the colored columns. You'll see the 2022 median residential, 2022 median household income amounts versus the 2023 median household income amounts. If you go to the very last column, you'll see what those percent changes were. I think that
The state average is not on there because a lot of folks use the state average.
Mr. Chairman.
It's right at the top. I
Right
see
at the
that.
top.
Thank
So
you.
what the statute states is that in order to qualify for the exemption, you must have household income that does not exceed 125% of the median household income for your county or the statewide average, whichever is higher. So as you look at this document, every county that is gray, their median household income is less than the statewide household income. So every county in gray would bump to that top line, which is the median. So you saw from 2022, median household income went from 69,120 to in 2023, it went up 6.9% to 73,920. If you look at the far right column, you'll see that we had counties, interestingly enough, that went negative. In Carbon County and in Washakie County, their household income numbers went down. However, we also have counties such as Lincoln County, where the household income went up 21.5% from one year to the next. Teton County, 19.7%. Some of the larger counties, Laramie County went up 11.6%. So under our current law, that is the 125% of median household income, you'll see that in that light blue column. And then on the second page, I want to cover current statute first. On the second page, you'll see the new 2023 median household income, median residential property tax amounts. And then the statute reads that you can receive 75% of your property tax bill up to 1/2 of that median residential property tax bill for your county. So you'll see what those numbers are in the second column. So up to 125% is where our current statute is. And you'll see that some of those numbers have increased significantly just under our current law. The other piece, just letting you know, the other piece of the qualification is that each house member cannot have assets that exceed $150,000 or, and that needs adjusted every year. So we'll be adjusting it this year. So that new number for 2023 refunds will be $156,900 per household member that can have assets. And not included in the asset number is the home that you're asking for the refund on, one vehicle per adult member of the household, any retirement savings that you have are not included in that. So really just those other assets, and that's under current law. Okay, so what House Bill 4 does, are there any questions related to our current statute?
Question here, Representative Swanitzer.
So any adult household member, I mean, literally means if I have my 21-year-old and my 19-year-old in my house, or age of majority, they count, and any assets they have also count. Is there any maximum to how many family members you can have?
Mr. Chairman, there is not, or minimum. Mr. Chairman, just moving on now to House Bill 4. You'll see on the front page, I've provided with our good numbers, these are exactly what would be applicable if this law were to go into effect for 2023 refunds. Right now, the effective date on this bill is 2025. But if it were, excuse me, I take that back. On this bill, it's effective immediately. So it would. I'm out of practice on this too, Mr. Chairman. So this bill does take effect immediately. So what you're looking at is statewide. Now you're going to include household incomes that are $92,400 up through $129,360. That's quite a span. And so the second page then provides you with the breakdown, because the higher your income is, so for example, 135% of median income in Albany County, you would only receive 85% of the refund if your income, had your income been less than 125%. So that would be a refund of $903.17 maximum. And then all the way over to the 175% of median income, which is only a 5%, which would be $53.13. So related to how this bill is administered, while it is true that county treasurers across the state accept applications, all of the applications are processed through the Department of Revenue. We also have an online portal that the property owners can apply online. And then, of course, they submit applications to us as well. So in order for us to implement House Bill 4, we would need to have some programming on that system. We have reached out to Enterprise Technology Services. We did provide these notes in numbers in the fiscal note. They're indicating approximately 3 weeks just for the development and at a cost of about $10,000 to update our property tax refund program to accommodate House Bill 4. The other item that we requested, quite honestly, we anticipate that this will expand the number of applicants significantly. And so we are asking for temporary funding for temporary staff for that 6 months from April 1st till the end of September. We'd like to be able to hire at least 2 more people. Believe me, the phones get pretty crazy when this program, you do have to apply no later than the first Monday in June. And then that's when we start getting into the nitty-gritty of them making sure that they've provided the documentation that's required and those types of things. So we would need approximately $70,000 in this immediately to implement this for 2024. I am very concerned. Typically, we have applications to county treasurers and applications available. We have historically mailed to anyone who applied for the program in the past year. We automatically mail them an application when they're printed, and we usually do that about the 1st of April. But there's going to be a real time crunch on this if we implement this for 2024. And so
Let me just ask, less tiers is better.
less tiers, Mr.
That's a
Chairman.
loaded question a little bit, but And then let me,
We will administer however the legislature deems appropriate, but
Yeah.
I do believe that the tiers are going to add to confusion mostly for the taxpayer.
right, I agree. What about, just real quick on page 2, just, can you explain for the public and all of us the gross income definition that now through rule? Because we had a lot of talk about this in the interim back a few months ago. So go ahead, tell us how you define that gross income.
Mr. Chairman, the statute is very clear, and
Yeah.
there was an amendment that was proposed to change that gross income, but the testimony in October during the interim committee meeting was that is very challenging if you change that gross income number. It's very clear right now on,
No problem.
it's not a problem now. Our applications clarify gross income, and we also have rules, our Chapter 19 rules. If you change that gross income, we would need to
Yeah.
readjust that. But right now, this bill does not change that definition from what has been administered historically.
Okay, very good. Representative Wanster has a question and.
So, thank you, Director Henson. When they are proving their gross income, is that their tax returns they're turning over to the department? It seems a little scary to me that that amount of personal information on our citizens is all going to your department, and maybe you know that anyway. So talk to me what they have to prove and then what you do with all that information and how it gets destroyed after the fact.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Zwanitzer, so they do need to provide documentation of all income and documentation of what their tax bill was and that the taxes have been paid. And so, yes, we do get all of that information, but as you can imagine, the Department of Revenue handles a great deal of confidential information, taxpayer return information. We do have statutes that information is held in confidence and cannot be disclosed, and that we don't destroy that information, but we do hold that information. But we do require proof of income. So perhaps your only income is Social Security. Then we need that Social Security statement. And honestly, we have not, that has not been a challenge. Property owners have that documentation that they can provide to us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here, Director. A quick question, since we're talking about the tiers and whether we should eliminate some or narrow it down, the number of them down, is there a value in keeping it the way it is and just evaluating it based on the enterprise system upgrade to handle these, where we could come back at a later date and see which tiers were utilized, how much it cost to to administer each of those tiers, where we could make a good decision as to how these tiers should look in the future? Is there a value in that to you?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Bear, I will say that when the statute was put in place, the household income is updated on an annual basis, so that keeps track of how the world is today. Not only that, we use 1/2 of the median residential property tax bill. That changes every year. We update the asset test by the updated cost of living. So the three components really initially in statute, they keep pace with the times. If in fact the legislature would like to broaden the number of folks for ease of administration, just simply if you want to go from 125% of median income to 135% of median income, I don't have to program that. Last year you went from 75% of median household income to 125%. That just meant I put different numbers in our system. We can do that without any programming costs. So it's only where you have tiers, because think of it as a taxpayer, I have to look at this second piece of paper, figure out where I fall in the income, and then I have to decide, do I get up to $903 or am I $690 based on, I was at 137% of median household income. So where do I fall? I think the challenge of explaining that has been our biggest concern administratively.
Things you want to share with us, Director?
Mr. Chairman, I would be remiss if I didn't state that this bill also applies to the county option property tax refund program, and that is administered by local county treasurers. For 2022 refunds, we had 5 counties that funded and implemented that program, and definitely the county treasurers can speak to that and how many applicants they had. The other thing that this bill does is it does move back the application deadline for those county option applications. So, but with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
The new, you know, we always hear stuff. A lot of it's hearsay and anecdotal, but I mean, what's your confidence that the system isn't being gamed by, I mean, we want to focus on those people, but there's always sometimes, so what's your thoughts on that? Thank you. Someone could take advantage of it that shouldn't qualify.
So, Mr. Chairman, much like what you heard in earlier testimony, we take the applications. It's a sworn statement. If they complete the application and say they meet the criteria, we don't have any authority at the Department of Revenue to audit. As far as, you know, requesting additional information, we can put in our rules that proof of income, proof that you've paid your property taxes required. But as far as challenging someone, we would not do that. And county treasurers, I believe, would speak also to that. It is interesting in that there have been cases where we've been provided information from a county treasurer. They're on the ground. They know whether that property owner has multiple properties or not. We don't know that. But they may give us a heads up, and then we'll just reach out to that taxpayer and say, did you realize that the other real estate that you own has to be included in this asset test? Could you give me an idea of what that's worth? And they'll, in most cases, absolutely be honest. I misunderstood. You're right. I don't qualify. I do have assets in excess of that $150,000. So I believe that, are there going to be people that game the system? Yes, because I believe that there's always someone that is going to find that loophole. But for the most part, I absolutely believe that those that apply and qualify are those that are in need of tax relief. My confidence is high.
And anybody opposed to this bill? I mean, and actually, maybe we'll just take all comment. If you want to comment on this bill, fill the chairs. Here's our time, it's 9:44. So we got about 11 minutes, so we can get up there on time and not be late to, so go ahead, fill the chairs and we just start, go ahead. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Emily Parvasini, Sublette County Treasurer and President of the County Treasurers Association. I am speaking in favor of the property tax refund program, but not in favor of this bill. The tiers make it very, very difficult. It will cost more money. It will grow government. And as a conservative Republican, that is not something that I'm interested in doing. When you look at $53 for the top end on the tier, those people won't even cash those checks. I can't get people to cash checks that I write that are less than $50 because they just can't be bothered. So you're gonna end up with a lot of checks floating around out there that you can't get people to cash. The program now, as it is, without any changes, works. It is phenomenal. In Sublette County in 2021, we had 23 applicants. Last year, we had 79 applicants that received the refund program. And my county was one that also provided a county-funded refund program. And when we first talked about providing that refund program, we looked at how much money was refunded in 2021, and it was approximately, I think it was around $50,000. So not knowing how many more people were going to apply in the next year, when we set aside money to provide a county refund, my commissioners chose $70,000, thinking that would be plenty of money. And it wasn't even close. And I know a lot of counties that did do a refund program as well, their numbers were very, very large last year. My county chose to stay with the money that they had set aside, that they had budgeted for, because that is a responsible way to proceed. And then those dollars were spread over everyone that applied and got the refund from the count or from the state. We've also in Sublette County, and I know I've talked to several other counties, when we get the list back from the state that says, here's all the people that applied, here's all the people that got the refund, and here's all the ones that didn't because of lack of information, or they made too much money, or whatever disqualified them from the refund, there's always people on that list that you have to take a double look and think, gosh, I know that they have rental properties, and I'm pretty sure these people just spent 3 weeks in Taiwan on a house. Like, how did they qualify? So there's definitely some abuse to the system, and by expanding it, it allows for more abuse, I believe. But we, as county treasurers, really, really like this refund program because it helps the people that need it. And I would stand for questions. Thank you.
Dr. Brown?
Mr. Chairman, Boyd Brown with the Wyoming School Boards Association, neither for nor against, just want to talk a little bit about what state property tax does and where it goes and where it's spent. So again, the information that I'm going to share with you is right out of the finance data book from the LSO, and then also from the Wyoming Taxpayers Association. So probably not going to be anything earth-shattering for you, but just want to make sure everybody's aware of it. For the school foundation program, there's 12 mills assessed statewide that goes into that program. Locally, school districts assess 25 mill levies, or if they have debt, they can assess more for the debt. 6 mill levies for each county that goes back to the local school district. Community colleges can assess a maximum of 10 mills. Counties cannot exceed 12 mills. Cities and towns cannot exceed 8 mills. And then there's also special districts, cemetery districts, fire districts, hospital districts, different things like that. Again, and then at the state level, we know that federal mineral royalty funds go into the school foundation program account. We also have investment money that goes in there, recapture from the school districts where more than their guarantee is generated locally, and then other fines and forfeitures. When you look at property taxes, the amount of money coming in property taxes based on mineral production is 47% of, for 23, it's going to be 52% of our mineral production. Residential property is 29%. Industrial is 7%. Commercial is 6%. Industrial state assessed is 4%, and agricultural lands are 2%. And then how the money is used, 69% of the money goes to public schools, 17% of that money goes to county government, 8% of the money goes to special districts, 4% to community colleges, and 2% to cities and towns. So just so we're thinking about how that works, again, school districts are guaranteed a specific amount of money based on the Constitution that would come, I guess. So the issue of thinking about it on a whole with all the property tax bills out there, how are we going to backfill that if it provides a deficit for school districts, and then knowing that the money also goes back to local counties and cities and towns. So just not for or against, just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
Good. Any questions, Dr. Brown? Appreciate Representative Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just a quick question. Do you have a good feel for how much the budget, if you will, how much has gone to schools has increased over the last, say, 4 to 6 years? Let's say 6 years. Do you have a good feel for that?
I might be able to find it real quick here. So the school foundation program payments from 2019 has gone from $4.8 billion to $1.50 billion from 2019 to 2023. 1.4 billion to 1.50 billion.
Yeah, 1.48 or 4.
Yep. And that's, again, out of the data book.
Yeah. Well, and I think, I think we get a lot of emails that, the state doesn't need any more money. None of these dollars, these are all local dollars, and we all know that, but it's important for the citizens, and I've tried to communicate that with everyone. It's local government. I mean, that's why school districts and county commissioners are here and local government, but we certainly hear about it a lot, but we appreciate you dropping those facts on us. I think the other interesting thing, you said 52% is minerals, ad valorem, and that's really why ad valorem is so not unstable, but really, so you've linked education, probably the most volatile revenue stream in state government, and so that's part of it, but that's where we live, and we're very thankful for our minerals who pay half our taxes, and legacy minerals with the investments pay another third, so we're really blessed. But appreciate that kind of update and kind of bringing us back home on that. Now I'm going to move to Mr. Reeman. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, members of the
Thank you,
committee,
Dr. Brown.
Jeremiah Reeman again with the County Commissioners Association. This is an effective program and one we support, and it's certainly targeted. As has been mentioned, this bill contains provisions relative to the county option, which we supported a couple of years ago, getting that in place. Has also been mentioned, there are 5 counties that are offering that program: Albany, Converse, Sublette, Teton, and Lincoln. And just of note, and I don't think they used the entirety of what they set aside, but Converse County set aside more money than they actually take in residential property taxes for refund. So they're very serious about offering this program. I am concerned about the number of tiers in this bill, as has been mentioned by many others, and that's potential to disrupt those that are currently participating in the county option, but more importantly, those that aren't and may want to consider being a part of the program. So I appreciate that you're going to take a look at that. Mr. Chairman, the only other thing that I wanted to mention is that I brought an amendment to you at your, I believe it was your September meeting, and unfortunately, although you adopted that, it was left out of the bill, and so I passed around some language. What that's designed to do is to allow for a county to partner with the other tax beneficiaries of property taxes. One of the main reasons, if not the main reason, that I hear counties say we don't want to get into this is that they alone bear the cost of the county program. That means that the school district is still getting its money, the special districts, everybody else is getting their money, but the county's bearing the brunt of that cost. So my amendment is intended to allow for that partnership to happen and for all of the taxing entities to offer up a county program. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd appreciate if you're supportive of that. I suspect my members will be supportive of this bill if you amend those tiers. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd stand for any questions.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Are there any other members of the audience that like to testify on this bill? We're really running out of time. It's 9:55, but we'd certainly take your comment. And we're going to have more comment in this committee, no doubt about it. And we might have to start our meetings a little earlier in the morning, be fine, and that's fine. We're all early birds, so. Okay, so I'm going to close public comment. And we will lay this bill back. We won't vote on it, but let's work it a few minutes here. Members, what's your pleasure? First of all, do we have a motion on the bill? Okay, it's been moved by Representative Locke. Now, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been Representative Storr, second that bill. Okay, members, I'm just gonna, I'll work it page by page, page 1, then we're going to 2 and 3. As I open this up. Okay, and then over to page 3 and 4. That's where you see the tiers. And Representative Wanitzer, do you have a motion?
Philosophically, Mr. Chairman, if I would really like to reduce it to 3 tiers from the current 6, I just don't want to play with those numbers, but perhaps for our Thursday meeting, I will have an amendment drafted but I just kind of want to get a feel of support from the committee to do something like that, to reduce the number of tiers, or how many we think there should be.
Good question. Any discussion, Representative Byron? Let's talk about that. I'm thinking at most 2 tiers, the one we have, and maybe at 145 was my thought, but go ahead, Representative Byron.
Thank you, Chairman Harshman. Yeah, I'm in agreement with Representative Wanitzer, and I've been playing with some numbers, struggling with some of these higher tiers and trying to simplify some of this. So I think in respect of time, we have that discussion, but certainly have an appetite to reduce those tiers down to a different number.
Okay, Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Representative Byron and Zwanitzer will get that ready for our Thursday meeting.
Okay, and so I think we're gonna pause action. Any last word on this? And we're gonna have to probably get rolling here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would support that idea. I do think it's just worth noting what we're trying to do here is to get rid of that cliff and allow some people to take advantage of this program who may be just missing the mark. And I'll just say for Teton County, we had about 300 applicants. The average income was just over $67,000 per household. And their average tax bill was about $8,400. So this program really does work for our community and is really meaningful, and is not being taken advantage, at least not to my knowledge, looking at the numbers there. So
Okay,
I would
very-
support a reduction in the tiers and simplification, but.
Very good. And I think, to wrap this up, Director, I think this is really helpful as we look at these tiers and these numbers. And the treasurer said, nobody's going to cash a check for $53. And you look at that, some of them are for $37, $32 in those end columns. And that's a lot of work for that, I think. So appreciate all your testimony. We'll work on this a little more and bring it back up on Thursday morning. Look for probably an earlier start time on Thursday. And so we're gonna, this bill is not laid back yet. We'll keep it on the table and we'll just bring it up when we start again on Thursday. So the meeting is adjourned. Appreciate you all for coming, and we'll see you on Thursday morning. Thank you.